The crystal container hummed with an energy that made the air itself taste metallic. Inside the translucent walls, something moved that shouldn't exist in any sane universe. Ambassador Kelron watched the human delegation examine their gift with what appeared to be mild curiosity rather than the appropriate terror. "This is a void wraith," Kelron explained, his forearms gesturing toward the containment unit. "It is perhaps the most dangerous weapon ever created by any species in known space. One of these creatures consumed the entire Melkar system 3,000 years ago before we learned to contain them." The human woman leading their delegation nodded politely. Her name was Riley Thompson, and she wore the simple blue uniform of the Terran Federation with no decoration except a single silver star on her collar. She looked tired, as if she had been fighting wars for longer than she cared to remember. "We appreciate the gesture, Ambassador," Thompson said. "The Terran Federation values this alliance with the Thorian Empire." Kelron felt his secondary heart skip a beat. These humans had just fought off the most devastating hive invasion in galactic history. They had held the line when 3 other species had fallen back in terror. Their ships were smaller, their weapons less advanced, yet somehow they had prevailed. Through sheer stubborn determination, the void wraith pressed against its crystal prison, sensing new minds nearby. It was ancient beyond measure, created in the dark times when the Thorian Empire faced extinction from an enemy whose name was forbidden to speak. The creature was pure hunger given form, designed to consume matter at the quantum level and grow stronger with each feeding. "The containment field requires constant maintenance," Kelron continued, handing Thompson a datapad thick with technical specifications. "The creature must be fed exactly every 72 hours. Raw materials only. Never organic compounds. The feeding process is dangerous and requires a minimum of 12 technicians in full protective gear." Thompson's companion, a younger man with graying hair, leaned closer to examine the container. The void wraith immediately shifted toward him, its form becoming more solid as it focused its attention. Kelron tensed, ready to activate emergency protocols, but the human showed no fear. "Interesting energy signature," the man said. "It's almost like it's trying to communicate." "Communication is impossible," Kelron said quickly. "The void wraiths are pure instinct. They know only hunger and destruction. That is why they make such effective weapons." The third human, a woman with short, dark hair, was taking readings with a handheld scanner. "The quantum fluctuations are unlike anything in our databases. This could revolutionize our understanding of extra-dimensional physics." Kelron felt a chill run through his exoskeleton. These humans were looking at the most feared weapon in the galaxy with the eyes of scientists rather than soldiers. In his culture, the void wraiths were spoken of in whispers, locked away in the deepest vaults where only the most trusted guards ever saw them. "You must understand," Kelron said, his voice taking on the formal tones used for sacred matters. "These creatures have been the ultimate deterrent for our empire for millennia. No enemy has ever faced them and survived. We gift this to humanity because you have proven yourselves worthy allies, but you must treat it with the respect it deserves." Thompson finally looked up from the datapad. Her eyes were steady and calm, showing none of the awe or fear that Kelron expected. "We understand the responsibility, Ambassador. The Terran Federation does not take such gifts lightly." The ceremony concluded with the traditional exchange of binding oaths. Kelron watched as the humans carefully loaded the containment unit onto their transport, using anti-gravity lifts and following proper safety protocols. Yet something about their manner troubled him. They handled the container with the same casual efficiency they might use for any piece of dangerous equipment. As the human delegation prepared to depart, Thompson approached Kelron one final time. "Ambassador, may I ask a personal question?" "Of course. How long have your people kept these creatures in containment?" The question caught Kelron off guard. "Since their creation, naturally. They are far too dangerous to allow freedom of any kind." Thompson nodded slowly. "And in all that time, has anyone ever tried to study them? To understand what they actually are rather than what they were designed to do." "Study them?" Kelron's translator struggled with the concept. They are weapons. One does not study a plasma cannon to understand its feelings. Something that might have been a smile crossed Thompson's face. We humans have a saying, Ambassador. One person's weapon is another person's opportunity to learn something new. With that cryptic comment, the humans departed. Kelron watched their ship disappear into hyperspace, carrying with it the most dangerous weapon his people had ever created. He tried to tell himself that he had done the right thing, that humanity had earned this trust through their courage and sacrifice, but as he stood alone in the empty ceremonial hall, Kelron could not shake the feeling that he had just made a terrible mistake. Not because the humans might misuse the weapon, but because they might do something far worse. They might try to understand it. The thought kept him awake for the next 3 cycles. Somewhere in human space, scientists were probably already running experiments on a creature that had been designed to end civilizations. They would poke and prod and analyze, never realizing that some things in the universe were meant to remain mysteries. Kelron tried to comfort himself with the knowledge that the containment field was absolute. Nothing could survive contact with a void wraith. Even if the humans made mistakes, the creature would simply consume whatever was foolish enough to get too close and then return to its dormant state. What Kelron did not know, could not have imagined, was that 3 days later, a research team at Terran Station Gamma would make first contact with the creature inside the container. Not as scientists studying a weapon, but as one intelligent species reaching out to another, and the void wraith, for the first time in 3,000 years of isolation, would reach back. The coffee in Dr. Amy Foster's mug had gone cold 3 hours ago, but she hadn't noticed. Her attention was completely focused on the data streaming across her workstation, each new reading more impossible than the last. Across the laboratory, her research partner, Dr. Ben Collins, was having an animated discussion with their computer system about quantum probability matrices. "Amy, you need to see this," Ben called out, his voice carrying a mixture of excitement and disbelief. The energy readings from the containment chamber just spiked again. Amy pushed her chair across the lab floor, rolling from her workstation to Ben's monitoring station. Through the reinforced observation window, she could see into the primary containment chamber where their unusual guest had been residing for the past 2 weeks. The void wraith moved within its crystal prison like liquid shadow, but something about its behavior had changed dramatically since its arrival. "Look at this pattern," Ben said, pointing to a series of wave-like formations on his screen. The creature isn't randomly testing the containment field. It's creating structured pulses. This looks almost like communication, Amy finished. It's trying to talk to us. The implications were staggering. According to every piece of Dorian documentation they had received, void wraiths were supposed to be mindless engines of destruction. They were described as having the intelligence of a virus, driven only by an endless hunger to consume matter and energy, yet the readings told a completely different story. "There's more," Ben continued, switching to a different monitoring system. "Remember yesterday when Technician Lisa dropped her scanner near the containment field?" Amy nodded. Lisa had been performing routine maintenance when she accidentally knocked her diagnostic tool off the platform. The scanner had landed just outside the containment barrier, well within the safe zone, but close enough to make everyone nervous. "Watch the recorded footage," Ben said, activating a holographic replay. The scene materialized above his workstation. Lisa could be seen working methodically around the containment chamber when her scanner slipped from her hands. As the device clattered to the floor, the void wraith immediately pressed itself against the inner wall of its prison, forming what appeared to be a pseudopod that pointed directly at the fallen scanner. "It was showing her where it fell," Amy said softly. "It was trying to help." "Gets better," Ben said, fast-forwarding the recording. "Watch what happens when she picks it up." On the replay, Lisa retrieved her scanner and gave a small wave toward the containment chamber, a casual gesture of thanks. The void wraith immediately began creating a series of rippling patterns across its surface, movements that bore an unmistakable resemblance to waving back. Amy felt a chill run down her spine. "Ben, we need to run a full intelligence assessment." If this creature is actually sentient, already started, Ben said, pulling up another set of readings. I've been running standard cognitive tests for the past week. Pattern recognition, problem solving, memory retention. Amy, this thing isn't just intelligent, it's learning at an exponential rate. The evidence was overwhelming. In just 2 weeks, the Void Wraith had progressed from simple reactive behavior to complex pattern creation. It had learned to distinguish between different staff members, showing what appeared to be preferences for certain individuals. When Dr. Martinez played classical music in the lab, the creature would create elaborate light displays and rhythm with the compositions. There's something else, Ben said, his voice dropping to a whisper. I think it's lonely. Amy looked through the observation window at the creature floating in its crystal cage. During active hours, when the lab was full of people and activity, the Void Wraith was alert and responsive, creating patterns and movements that suggested engagement. But during the night shift, when only a skeleton crew remained, the creature would curl into a tight ball in the center of its containment field and remain motionless for hours. The Thorians kept these things in complete isolation, Amy said, pieces of a horrible puzzle beginning to form in her mind. For thousands of years, they stored them in underground vaults with no contact, no stimulation, nothing but darkness and silence. And then they wondered why the creatures went berserk when they were finally released, Ben added. Amy, what? If the destructive behavior isn't natural? What if it's a trauma response? The possibility was both heartbreaking and terrifying. If Void Wraiths were naturally intelligent, social creatures that had been driven to madness by millennia of solitary confinement, then everything the galaxy believed about them was wrong. The Thorians hadn't created weapons, they had created victims. We need to be very careful how we proceed, Amy said. If Command thinks we're anthropomorphizing a dangerous weapon, they'll shut down the research program and ship it back to the Thorians. What if we're not anthropomorphizing? Ben asked. What if we're just recognizing intelligence when we see it? Their conversation was interrupted by a soft chime from the containment monitoring system. Amy looked up to see that the Void Wraith had formed itself into a series of geometric shapes against the inner wall of its prison. The shapes were precise, mathematical, and arranged in a pattern that was hauntingly familiar. Those are prime numbers, Amy said, her voice barely above a whisper. It's showing us prime numbers. Ben was already running calculations on his workstation, starting with 2, 3, 5, 7, 11. Amy, it's demonstrating mathematical knowledge. This isn't random pattern making, it's trying to prove its intelligence to us. As they watched, the creature continued its mathematical display, moving through increasingly complex number sequences. It created fractals, showed geometric progressions, and even attempted what appeared to be a visual representation of the Fibonacci sequence. It knows we're watching, Amy said. It knows we're scientists, and it's trying to communicate using the universal language of mathematics. The realization hit both researchers simultaneously. They weren't just studying an alien weapon. They were making first contact with an intelligent species that had been imprisoned and misunderstood for millennia. The Void Wraith wasn't trying to escape its containment to wreak havoc on the galaxy. It was trying to prove that it deserved to be free. Ben, Amy said slowly, I think we're going to need a bigger research team. Through the observation window, the Void Wraith completed its mathematical demonstration and began creating a new pattern. This one was simpler, more direct. It formed the shape of a human hand, then created its own appendage in response. The message was clear even without words. It wanted to shake hands. Engineer Roberts had seen a lot of impossible things during his 15 years maintaining deep space research stations, but nothing had prepared him for what happened during the hull breach on Deck 7. The meteor impact had been completely unexpected, tearing through the station's outer plating and trapping him behind a wall of twisted metal and sparking electronics. His radio was dead, his emergency beacon wasn't transmitting, and the air in his sealed section was getting thinner by the minute. Roberts had resigned himself to becoming another statistic in the dangerous business of frontier science when something extraordinary happened. The twisted metal blocking his escape route began to glow with a soft blue light dot. At first, he thought it was electrical discharge from damaged power conduits. But as he watched, the debris started moving with deliberate purpose, bending and shifting to create a narrow passage. The blue glow intensified, and Roberts realized with growing amazement that something was actively reshaping the wreckage to free him. "Control, this is Roberts," he said into his radio, which had suddenly started working again. "I don't know how, but something is clearing a path through the debris." Dr. Amy Foster's voice crackled through the static. "Roberts, get to safety immediately. We're reading massive energy fluctuations from your section." Roberts didn't need to be told twice. He squeezed through the newly created opening and made his way to the emergency airlock, but he couldn't stop thinking about what he had witnessed. The metal had moved like it was alive, guided by an intelligence that understood exactly what needed to be done to save him. 2 hours later, Roberts stood in the main laboratory listening to Amy and Ben explain what had really happened. The void wraith, which the research team had started calling Wisp, had somehow projected a portion of itself outside its containment chamber to rescue him. "According to our readings, it shouldn't be possible," Ben said, scrolling through data. On his workstation, "The containment field is supposed to be absolute. Nothing gets in or out without our approval." Amy pointed to a series of quantum signature readings on her display, but Wisp didn't break the containment. It found a way to extend itself through quantum tunneling while keeping its core safely inside the chamber. It's like it created a temporary bridge between dimensions. Roberts shook his head in amazement. "You're telling me that thing saved my life?" "More than that," Amy said. "It violated several fundamental laws of physics to do it." The implications were staggering. Over the following weeks, Wisp continued to demonstrate abilities that challenged everything the research team thought they knew about the universe. When a solar flare threatened the station's delicate instruments, Wisp somehow absorbed the excess radiation through the station's hull, converting the dangerous energy into harmless light displays that danced through the corridors. When the station's food synthesizer broke down, leaving the crew facing the prospect of emergency rations for 3 weeks until the next supply ship arrived, Wisp surprised everyone by restructuring raw carbon compounds into edible proteins. The food wasn't exactly gourmet, but it was nutritious and perfectly safe for human consumption. "It's like having a guardian angel," technician Lisa said during one of their weekly briefings. "Yesterday I was working on the power coupling in Section C when Wisp started flashing warning patterns. Turned out there was a dangerous buildup of plasma pressure that our sensors hadn't detected yet." Amy nodded, making notes on her tablet. "Wisp has been consistently protective of the crew. It seems to have developed emotional attachments to individual staff members. The creature had indeed formed preferences. It was most responsive to Amy and Ben, who spent the most time interacting with it, but it showed clear affection for other crew members as well. When Dr. Martinez played violin during his off-duty hours, Wisp would create complex visual harmonies that perfectly complemented the music. When Chief Engineer Patel was working late shifts, Wisp would brighten the corridor lighting along his route, making his job easier and safer. But perhaps the most remarkable development was Wisp's growing communication skills. The creature had progressed far beyond simple mathematical demonstrations. It now created detailed pictographs that told stories about its experiences, showed memories from before its containment, and even expressed what appeared to be humor. "Look at this sequence from yesterday," Ben said, projecting a series of images. Above his workstation, Wisp was showing us what happened when the Thorians first captured its kind. The images were heartbreaking. They showed creatures of pure energy dancing between stars, feeding on cosmic radiation and creating beautiful patterns in space that could be seen across entire solar systems. Then came darker images of capture, imprisonment, and the gradual transformation from free-flowing beings of light into the traumatized weapons the galaxy feared. "They weren't born as weapons," Amy said softly. "They were artists, explorers, maybe even philosophers. The Thorians turned them into weapons by treating them like weapons." Roberts studied the images with growing anger. "So these creatures have been prisoners for thousands of years, blamed for being dangerous when they were just trying to survive captivity? It gets worse, Ben said, pulling up another data file. According to WISP's communications, there are hundreds of others, still in Thorian vaults. Most of them have been in solitary confinement so long that they've lost the ability to think clearly. Amy felt sick. The scope of the injustice was almost incomprehensible. An entire species had been enslaved, tortured through isolation, and then condemned as monsters when they lashed out in desperation. "We have to do something," she said. "We can't just sit here knowing this. What can we do?" Ben asked. WISP is officially the property of the Terran Federation, which received it as a gift from the Thorian Empire. Legally, we have no standing to challenge how the Thorians treat their other specimens. Roberts crossed his arms and looked through the observation window at WISP, who was currently creating a gentle spiral pattern that seemed to pulse in time with his heartbeat. The creature had saved his life without being asked, had protected the entire crew from dangers they didn't even know existed, and had shown nothing but kindness in return for basic respect and companionship. "Maybe we can't challenge them legally," Robert said, "but we can prove them wrong scientifically. If we can document everything WISP has shown us, demonstrate that these creatures are intelligent and peaceful when treated properly, maybe we can change some minds." Amy smiled for the first time in days. A comprehensive study showing the true nature of void wraiths, not as weapons, but as a misunderstood species that deserves freedom and dignity. "The Thorians won't like it," Ben warned. "We'd essentially be calling them war criminals." Through the observation window, WISP had apparently been following their conversation. It created a new image, simple but powerful, a cage with an open door and a creature of light flying free among the stars. "Then we better make sure our evidence is absolutely undeniable," Amy said. The emergency meeting was called at 0600 hours, and Admiral Hayes looked like he hadn't slept in days. His weathered face was grim as he addressed the assembled research team through the holographic communication system. Behind him, Amy could see the busy bridge of a Federation warship, officers moving with the urgent efficiency that meant trouble was coming. "People, we have a situation," Hayes began without preamble. 3 hours ago, our listening post detected a Thorian battle fleet leaving their home system. Intelligence suggests they're heading straight for your position. Dr. Ben Collins leaned forward in his chair. "Admiral, what could they possibly want? We followed every protocol in the research agreement." Hayes pulled up a tactical display, showing dozens of Thorian vessels moving through hyperspace. "Ambassador Kelrin has been monitoring your research station through long-range sensors. He claims that you've contaminated or damaged the Void Wraith somehow. The quantum signatures coming from your station don't match what they expect from a properly contained specimen." Amy felt her heart sink. They had known this day might come, but she had hoped they would have more time to prepare their evidence. "Admiral, we need to explain what we've discovered. The Void Wraiths aren't what the Thorians think they are." "Doctor, I don't care if that thing can recite poetry and cook dinner," Hayes said sharply. "What I care about is that we have a fleet of very angry aliens demanding the return of their weapon, and if we refuse, they're prepared to take it by force." Through the observation window, Amy could see WISP pressing itself against the containment barrier. The creature had been agitated for hours, creating rapid patterns of distress that the research team had learned to interpret as anxiety. Somehow, WISP knew danger was approaching. "Admiral, please listen to us," Amy said desperately. "We have months of documented evidence that proves these creatures are intelligent, peaceful beings that have been tortured into becoming weapons. WISP has saved lives, protected our station, and shown nothing but kindness when treated with respect." "The Thorians will never accept that," Engineer Roberts interjected. "Their entire military doctrine is built around the fear these creatures inspire. If word gets out that Void Wraiths are actually harmless, it undermines their position as the galaxy's dominant power." Hayes studied the tactical display with the practiced eye of a career military officer. "The Thorian fleet will arrive in 18 hours. They're demanding immediate transfer of the specimen to their custody. If we refuse, they consider it an act of war." Amy looked around the room at her colleagues. They had all grown attached to Wisp over the past months, had come to see the creature not as a weapon or even as a research subject, but as a friend. The thought of handing it over to beings who would lock it away in darkness for the rest of its existence was unbearable. "There has to be another way," she said. "What if we could prove to the Thorians that they're wrong? Show them what Wisp really is?" Ben was already working on his tablet, pulling up files from their research archives. "We have everything documented. Wisp's intelligence tests, its protective behavior, the communication protocols we've developed. If we could just get them to look at the evidence objectively." "The Thorians don't do objective when it comes to void wraiths," Hayes said. "To them, these creatures are sacred weapons, gifts from their ancestors. Suggesting that they've been wrong for thousands of years is like telling them their entire religion is based on a lie." Robert stood up and walked to the observation window. Wisp immediately moved toward him, creating the gentle spiral pattern it used when trying to calm agitated humans. "What if we let Wisp speak for itself?" The room fell silent. Amy stared at Roberts, then at the creature floating peacefully in its containment chamber. In all their months of interaction, they had never considered the possibility of direct communication between Wisp and the Thorians. "The quantum frequencies are different," Ben said, thinking through the technical challenges. "Thorian neural patterns operate on different wavelengths than human brains. But if we could modify our communication interface—" "It's worth a try," Amy said, excitement building in her voice. "WISP has shown incredible adaptability. If it could find a way to communicate directly with the Thorians, show them the truth about its species." Hayes looked skeptical. "You're betting the future of human-Thorian relations on the hope that an alien creature can convince its former captors that they've been wrong for millennia?" Amy nodded firmly. "Admiral, Wisp has broken the laws of physics to save human lives. It's learned to create art, to express emotion, to form meaningful relationships with our crew. If any being in the universe can bridge the gap between species, it's Wisp." The decision was made to attempt contact. Ben and his engineering team worked frantically to modify their communication array, creating a hybrid system that could translate between human, Thorian, and the quantum frequencies that Wisp used for expression. The process was complicated by the fact that they were essentially creating a three-way translator for languages that had never been designed to interact. As they worked, Wisp seemed to understand what they were trying to accomplish. The creature began creating increasingly complex patterns, as if practicing for the most important conversation of its life. It showed them memories of its species' natural state, images of void wraiths dancing between stars and creating beauty on a cosmic scale. "It's preparing to tell them the truth," Amy realized. "Wisp is going to show the Thorians what they destroyed when they turned its people into weapons." The communication array came online just as the first Thorian ships dropped out of hyperspace. Admiral Hayes appeared on the main screen, his expression tense. "Doctors, Ambassador Kelran is demanding immediate surrender of the specimen. I'm trying to buy you time, but he's not interested in negotiations." Amy took a deep breath and activated the modified communication interface. "Wisp, are you ready?" The creature pulsed once, a signal they had learned meant yes. Then it began to sing. The sound that emerged from the quantum translator was unlike anything any of them had ever heard. It was music and mathematics, poetry, and pure emotion, all woven together into a symphony of meaning that transcended language barriers. Wisp was telling the story of its people, sharing memories that stretched back thousands of years, and pleading for understanding from the very beings who had imprisoned its kind. Throughout the Thorian fleet, similar songs began to answer. In the deepest vaults of the Thorian ships, other void wraiths heard Wisp's call and began to sing in return. For the first time in millennia, the scattered remnants of an entire species were speaking to each other across the darkness of space, and aboard the flagship, Ambassador Kelran stood frozen in shock as he realized that the weapons his people had created were trying to forgive them. The silence that followed Wisp's song lasted for 17 minutes and 32 seconds. Dr. Amy Foster knew the exact timing because she watched every second tick by on her chronometer, afraid that breaking the quiet would somehow undo the miracle they had just witnessed. Across the void of space, the Thorian battle fleet hung motionless. No weapons powered up, no demands for surrender came through the communication channels. Even the routine chatter of military coordination had stopped. It was as if an entire civilization had paused to listen to a truth they had spent millennia trying to forget. When Ambassador Kelran finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that Amy had never heard before. The proud, formal tones of Thorian authority were gone, replaced by something that sounded almost human in its vulnerability. "Human researchers," Kelran said slowly, "we request permission to come aboard your station." Admiral Hayes appeared on the main screen, his expression carefully neutral. "Ambassador, that's highly irregular. The research station has limited facilities for diplomatic meetings." "This is not about diplomacy," Kelran replied. "This is about understanding what we have done." 2 hours later, Amy stood in the main laboratory, watching a group of Thorian officials examine Wisp through the observation window. Kelran was there, along with several other high-ranking members of the Thorian military and what appeared to be their equivalent of scientists or philosophers. They moved with the careful precision of beings who had built their entire worldview around the control of dangerous forces. But Amy could see uncertainty in their body language. Wisp had been active since the Thorians arrived, creating elaborate displays of light and pattern that told the story of its species in visual form. The creature showed them star dancing, the ancient art of its people who had once moved freely through space, feeding on cosmic radiation and creating beauty among the galaxies. It showed them the first contact with Thorian explorers, the initial wonder and curiosity from both species. Then came the darker images. A capture, the first attempts at communication that were misunderstood as aggression, the gradual realization that the Thorians saw them only as potential weapons. Wisp showed the construction of the first containment chambers, the isolation, the slow descent into madness that came from being cut off from their natural environment and their own kind. "We called them feeding frenzies," one of the Thorian scientists said quietly. "When they were first released from containment, they would consume everything in their path before we could regain control." Ben nodded from his position at the monitoring station. "That wasn't aggression. That was starvation. You kept them in isolation for so long that when they finally encountered matter and energy again, they couldn't control their hunger." Amy watched Kelran's reaction carefully. The ambassador's forearms were held in a position that she had learned indicated deep distress in Thorian body language. His breathing was irregular, and the color patterns on his skin shifted rapidly between confusion and what might have been grief. "The destruction of the Melkar system," Kelran said, his voice barely above a whisper. 3 billion lives lost when one of them escaped containment." Wisp immediately responded to the mention of Melkar, creating a series of images that showed the event from its perspective. A creature driven mad by centuries of isolation, released into a populated system without any understanding of what it was destroying. The images showed the Void Wraith's growing horror as it realized what it had done. Its desperate attempts to stop itself even as its starved instincts drove it to continue feeding. "It didn't want to destroy Melkar," Amy said softly. "It was trying to stop itself, but it had been isolated for so long that it couldn't remember how to control its abilities." The room fell silent again as the implications sank in. The Thorians hadn't just created weapons from an innocent species. They had created tortured, traumatized beings who were capable of massive destruction, precisely because they had been denied the natural social connections that would have taught them control. Robert stepped forward, his expression serious. "Ambassador, how many others are there?" Kelran's skin patterns shifted to deep purple, indicating profound sorrow. "Across our empire, in the deepest vaults of our most secure facilities, we maintain 417 containment chambers. 417 beings, trapped in darkness and isolation for thousands of years." Amy felt sick thinking about the scale of suffering that represented. But she also felt a glimmer of hope, because if Wisp's transformation was any indication, those beings could still be saved. They can be healed, she said firmly. Wisp has shown us that with proper care, social interaction, and understanding, your void wraiths can return to their natural state. They don't have to remain weapons. A new voice spoke from among the Thorian delegation. It was one of their philosophers, an elderly being whose skin bore the intricate scarification that marked their highest academic rank. If what you say is true, then our civilization has committed a crime beyond measure. We have enslaved an entire species and called it glory. Wisp seemed to understand the weight of the moment. It created a new image, simple but powerful. Two figures, one clearly Thorian and one representing a void wraith, standing together beneath a field of stars. Between them was a small object that Amy recognized as a representation of friendship. "It's offering forgiveness," Ben said, amazement in his voice. "After everything your people have done, Wisp is offering to start over." Kelrin moved closer to the observation window. For a long moment he simply stared at the creature that his people had turned into a weapon of war. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone making a decision that would reshape history. "We will begin immediate preparation for the release of all contained specimens," he announced. "Our military scientists will work with your research team to develop proper rehabilitation protocols. The age of the void wraiths as weapons ends today." The transformation didn't happen overnight. It took months of careful negotiation, scientific collaboration, and gradual change in both human and Thorian understanding. But one by one, the containment chambers across Thorian space were opened. Beings that had been trapped in darkness for millennia were brought into the light, given care and companionship, and slowly nursed back to mental health. Not all of them recovered completely. Some had been damaged too badly by their long imprisonment, their minds too fractured to fully heal. But even these wounded beings showed improvement when given proper care, and many were able to find peace among their own kind. Wisp became the first ambassador of its species, traveling between human and Thorian space to help with the rehabilitation process. The creature that had once been seen as the ultimate weapon became a symbol of redemption and second chances. Amy often thought about the day she first saw Wisp in its containment chamber, how they had almost missed the signs of intelligence because they were looking for a monster instead of a person. It had taken human curiosity and compassion to see past the fear and recognize the truth. The galaxy was changing. Trade routes that had once been protected by the threat of void wraith deployment were now secured by voluntary cooperation from the creatures themselves. The beings that had once been forced to destroy now chose to create, turning their incredible abilities toward peaceful purposes. Wisp had established a permanent residence near Earth, working with human scientists to explore the boundaries of physics and possibility. The creature had developed what could only be called a sense of humor, often surprising research teams with elaborate practical jokes that bent the laws of reality in harmless but amusing ways. On quiet nights, when the research station was in sleep cycle, Amy would sometimes find Wisp creating art in the observation chamber. Vast, complex patterns of light and energy that told stories without words, expressed emotions that had no names in any human language, and painted pictures of a future where different species could work together despite their vast differences. The Thorian Empire had issued a formal apology to the Void Wraith species, though it would take generations to fully undo the damage of millennia. New protocols were established for first contact with unknown species, designed to prevent the kind of tragic misunderstanding that had led to the enslavement of an entire people. But perhaps the most important change was simpler and more profound. Across known space, when explorers encountered something they didn't understand, they remembered the lesson of the void wraiths, instead of asking, "How can we use this?" or "How can we control this?" They learned to ask, "What is this trying to tell us?" Roberts, now promoted to Chief of Operations for the expanded research program, often joked that humans had received the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy and accidentally turned it into the best friend anyone could ask for, but Amy knew it. wasn't an accident. It was the result of treating intelligence with respect, meeting fear with curiosity, and choosing understanding over control. Late one evening, as Amy was finishing her shift reports, Wisp created a new pattern in its chamber. The image was simple but profound, a small blue planet surrounded by stars, with streams of light connecting it to other worlds throughout the galaxy. Above it all, creatures of pure energy danced between the stars, no longer weapons or prisoners, but free beings pursuing their own dreams and destinies. It was a vision of the future they had helped create, where the deadliest weapon in the galaxy had become a bridge between worlds, and the greatest victory was not conquest but connection. Amy smiled as she watched the pattern fade and reform into something new, knowing that tomorrow would bring fresh discoveries and deeper understanding. Between species that had once seen each other as threats, the research station hummed quietly around them, a small outpost of cooperation in the vast darkness of space, where humans and aliens and beings of pure energy worked together to build something better than any of them could achieve alone. And at the center of it all was Wisp, the creature that had taught the galaxy that sometimes the most important question wasn't how to destroy your enemies, but how to turn them into friends.